What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mudline Motorsports. I haven't done a video in a while, so I wanted to take some time and put together a little video on just tips and tricks and things to consider when purchasing a used dirt bike. This won't only be things that you would want to consider before purchasing the bike, but also things that you would want to kind of go over, check, and make adjustments to after purchasing the dirt bike. So behind me I have a 2014 RMZ 250. We're currently getting this bike ready for resale, so I'm going to be putting this on the website and everything once it's complete. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into it and start kind of bringing up some things that you would definitely want to consider before you actually purchase a used dirt bike, and then also what dirt bike would be right for you and your weight and things to consider there too. So starting out, anytime you're going to go purchase a new dirt bike, you want to make sure that you're getting a bike that's going to suit your rider ability. What I mean by that is if you've never had a bike before and it's your first bike, you might want to start out on something a little bit more intermediate. The bike behind me is the same class bike. It's a 250 race bike that you see in supercross, motocross. Of course, it's nowhere as near tricked out as those pros have their bikes, but at the same time, it is a kind of an experienced rider bike. So there's a lot of other bikes out there that I'm not going to go into detail on, as you're just starting to ride, but you definitely want to look into maybe like a smaller four-stroke. KLX, which is Kawasaki, makes a 110 for younger riders. Guys that are a little bit older, this could be a good first bike for you, a 250F four-stroke or a 250F. But at the same time, just understand that it does have a lot of power, and it can still be dangerous. So just always remember to be safe. I also want to let you guys know that we're going to be doing a lot of media this year, a lot of content. So stay tuned for all of that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video. So when you are going, and whether you're purchasing this bike from an actual dealership or you're purchasing it just from any guy, Craigslist or Facebook or whatever, you want to consider a few things. I would say first and foremost, you want to have a good idea from the current owner. Was he the first owner? Has the bike ever been rebuilt? How many hours are on the bike? These are really good questions to ask before you even go to look at the bike. So for one, determine if it's priced right. But for two, just make sure that if you're going to go take the time and go look at the bike to possibly purchase the bike, make sure you ask these questions. Were you the first owner? And has the bike ever been rebuilt? If the bike's been passed from from owner to owner to owner, everything's kind of been lost in translation. So you want to consider that and take note that you're really probably not going to get the full story on the bike. If the bike is just maybe it's had two owners, or maybe this individual that's selling the bike is the only owner, that's always a good sign. I would ask to see if he has the title as well as the instruction manual. Whenever you go to actually pick up the bike, what you want to do is you want to be looking at a few things. You want to first be looking at the bike before you even start it up. You just want to kind of check the bike, check the front brakes. So maybe just kind of push on the bike and make sure the front brakes are working. That'll also, you'll feel the suspension compress a little bit. You want to feel a nice rebound on the suspension. Suspension can always be adjusted, but you don't want to have to pay to have the the suspension revalved or resprung. So suspension is a really great component to consider. And one of the ways to do that is to, before you even ride on the bike, kind of roll it forward, push the brake in. If you feel the suspension compress and it doesn't come back up, or it takes a while to come back up, or maybe it's just really stiff, some things that you want to consider. Just make sure that the suspension is a-okay. You also want to check the throttle. So what you want to do is you want to blip the throttle without it even running. You can kind of snap the throttle and let go. Snap the throttle and let go. You want to hear it snap back, and I'll show you that in just a few seconds. A good snappy throttle is a good indication that the bike was maintained and kind of taken care of. Throttle says a lot to me. After that, you want to kind of pick, just maybe go to the front end of the bike, grab the front wheel, and kind of wiggle it back and forth. So not front and back as much, but kind of from side to side. And what you're checking here is front wheel bearings. Just making sure that everything's nice and solid and it's not real loose. Sometimes bolts and everything could be vibrated loose, so you just want to keep that in mind and make sure that everything's nice and tight. But if you're getting some play, you're looking at front wheel bearings, but it's also a good indication that the previous owner didn't take as good of care of the bike as he should have, or it's just been ridden hard and put up wet. Same thing with the rear. Go to the rear tire. It's good to have it on a stand like I have now, and basically what you're going to do is you are going to take the back tire and kind of wiggle it and make sure that that's nice and solid. If your rear axle nut is loose, that will also cause there to be some play there. So make sure the rear axle nut's tight, as sometimes if they're not torqued to spec, they will also loosen up. So that's an easy fix. Moving on from there, you want to take a look at the chain. I like to kind of use the 3-finger gap rule. So there's a chain slide here, and I can get closer with the camera, but from here, you would just take 3 fingers and slide it right up against that chain slide, and the chain should be nice and tight. There shouldn't be a lot of play, and you don't want to get 4 fingers or more in there, and you don't want it to be really super tight. However, some people tighten their chain, tighter than it should be, so it's not a deal breaker. From there, you want to check the front and rear sprockets. What you're looking at for the front and rear sprockets is you're looking for curved teeth or possibly broken teeth. For instance, on this bike, the rear sprocket was fine. They're starting to sharpen up, but it wasn't bad enough to replace. But the front sprocket, we replaced. I will kind of describe this the best that I can. You're gonna start seeing the teeth become more narrow, and they are going to kind of curve. They'll all be curved in the same direction. You'll start to see that curvature. That means that a tooth is about to break, or multiple teeth are about to break. And in that case, the front sprocket needs to be replaced. Again, no deal breaker, but it's just something to consider when purchasing a new bike to get an idea of how many hours were on the bike. From there, what you want to do is basically go ahead and get the bike started. Now, sometimes I'll jump on the bike and sit on it and kind of feel the rear shock. Just like we checked the front suspension, we kind of did just a little test on it without riding it. Same thing with the rear. When you sit on the bike, you want to try to gauge how much sag the bike, how far it's dropping when you sit on it. It's unlikely that the rear shock's blown out. So that being said, crank the bike up, let it idle, and do a walk around. Now, if it has the consistent purr, it has the nice little thump, 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 thump. That's what you're looking for. Now it's time to kind of further inspect the bike. So it's sitting there, it's running, do a walk around, and just like I said, just kind of hear it out, feel it out, and then once it's warmed up for a little bit, you want to blip the throttle. When I say blip the throttle, that's a quick snap. And this right here will show you right away if there's a dead spot, which is common on, say, a bike. So this is a 2014. So what is that? It's 7 years old now. So you're dealing with a bike that's 7 years old. It's not uncommon for maybe the injector, it might have just a little trash in it, needs to be cleaned out, or maybe the throttle position sensor is just kind of a little out of whack and can be tuned up. I keep saying throttle position sensor, guys, if you can, you don't want to have to mess with that. It's probably one of the more difficult tasks to complete for a dirt bike mechanic, to get that dialed in perfect. Usually you don't ever have to touch them, but if somebody had ever tried to pull the throttle body off and has nicked or hit this throttle position sensor, which is this little black component right here on the throttle body, it could need to be adjusted. But that initial blip is probably where you're going to see any irregularities, if you see any at all. From there, you can go ahead and give it a quarter throttle blip, or maybe even hit it half throttle and hold it out for a little bit. But there's no sense in giving it full throttle where it's just sitting and idling. Do people do it? Absolutely, all the time. But the last thing you want to do is going to buy a bike and you end up doing something stupid and you know, now you're stuck with it, or, you know, it's just kind of a hard position if you kind of funk up the bike before you've even bought it. So from there, after the bike's warmed up and you've kind of went through the throttle, if everything checks out, you have the nice purr, everything's looking good, I would just simply ask the guy to take it for a ride. He shouldn't be, you know, he shouldn't have any objection to that. And so hop on the bike and give it a spin. If you're, you know, a tenured rider, or, you know, you've ridden quite a few bikes, you know what you're doing, get on the bike and make sure, what I always do is go through every single gear. Last thing you want to do is, you know, only take a small ride around it. You don't really get to open it up. You want to get all the way up to fifth. You know, if you can find a straightaway or whatever, to get it all the way up into fifth. Even if you can't open it all the way up, you can still pull the clutch in and shift, you know, shift just to make sure all the gears are there. But it's good to kind of ride the bike in those gears just to make sure it's responding well and there's nothing going on in the transmissions. I would say that the transmissions are really kind of the last thing to go in these bikes. They got really strong transmissions in these bikes, and you're probably going to hear a little bit of excessive backfire, or potentially a dead spot in the throttle is more common than really having anything to do with the gearbox. So from there, now if you're not planning on jumping the bike and there's really nowhere to hit, you know, like a ditch or a jump or anything like that, if there is, great. I would, once you see that the bike's, you know, has been taken care of and it's solid, I would go ahead and, you know, hit a few, even if it's just a few bumps or jumps or a ditch or something, and this will give you an indication on that suspension if it's bottoming out or what's going on. And then after that, if everything checks out, the front and back brakes are working as they should, bring the bike back, and then, you know, continue to negotiate your deal. That's kind of really the main points that I wanted to hit on. There are a lot of other things that, you know, if you really wanted to be particular, that you could, you know, possibly want to check out. But now that we went over that kind of in a broad stroke, let's kind of take a look at the bike. And all right, guys, so what we're going to do is kind of do a run through on some of the things that I was going over at the beginning of the video. Usually when the bike's off the stand is the best time to do this. You just want to take the front tire and just listen for any chatter or rattle there. That could be an indication that your front bearings are going, and another indication that there's a lot of time on the bike. You want to just make sure that the front brake's nice and tight and that it's actually working. So if you spin the tire, make sure it stops the front tire. Same thing with the clutch. Just give it a good compress and just make sure it just all feels good. From there, suspension's a totally different topic. Excuse me. And I will make another video on dialing in your suspension, how to bleed your forks, all of that. But the main thing is like I was saying before, when you get on the bike, or just even if you're off the bike, whenever it's on the ground, you can roll it forward, bring in the front brake, and just make sure that you have a nice plush suspension and that it's reacting. You won't be able to tell much, but you can definitely take a look. You also want to inspect the lower fork tubes just for any oil that could be running down. Make sure that they're always going to be slick, but you don't want to see them have any seepage. That's going to be an indication that your fork seals need to be replaced. And this, with this particular bike, these forks were fine, so everything was good there. Next, let's go to the throttle. So let's keep in mind that whenever I purchased this bike, the throttle was sticking, and I have fixed it. So now that this throttle is how it should be, this is the sound that you want to hear when you bring it back, let it go. It should snap forward like that. Awesome. And yeah, that's kind of it for the controls and the front end. From there, you want to move to the rear, and same thing with the back tire, which I'm going to be replacing this back tire. It's got like 30% tread on it, but let's give it a nice little shake. Again, it's good to do it with it off the stand. This one's already checked and it is solid. Take a look at the chain slack. You don't even want to ride the bike if you have like an excessive amount of chain slack there. So what I would do is just check this and kind of get an idea of where it's at, and this will kind of tell you if the current owner was taking care of the bike as he should. With the front and rear sprocket, you're looking at the teeth. As you can tell, it's a brand new front sprocket, so the teeth are nice and straight, no curvature, nice and solid there. On the rear, this is a good time to show you this because this one hasn't been replaced, and it didn't necessarily need it, but you can definitely see the teeth are sharpening up. There's no curve, there's no broken teeth, so the rear sprocket's staying on this one. Other than that, you can go ahead and go through a lot of the gears right here if you want to shift to it without even cranking it up. But other than that, man, that's basically it. I am going to fire up the bike just to kind of give you guys an idea of what you're listening for. Okay guys, so basically that is the purr that I'm talking about. Nice and consistent, and yeah, that is basically exactly what you're looking for. The little blip in the throttle at the end was to show you that when you snap the throttle back quick and let it go, it should respond really good. These are fuel injected bikes, so you should get that really quick. Shouldn't be a dead spot. If there is, again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but unless you know what you're doing with pulling this throttle body off and going in and cleaning out the fuel injector, adjusting throttle position sensor and stuff, you really don't want to have to pay somebody else to go in there and fix it, because that's not a very inexpensive thing to have done. That about sums up the video, guys. I did want to just go over a few other things to consider, but yeah, other than that, I hope this video helps you guys. Guys, basically what you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to make sure that you get the oil flushed out in these bikes. As soon as you get it, go ahead and pull the drain plug, flush out the oil, put some good quality oil back in it. I usually run like Lucas 10W30 through my bikes. 10W30 is usually the best route with any bikes, but always refer to your owner's manual. Also pull the oil filter cap off, replace the oil filter, and from there you can check your coolant level. Usually the coolant's not something that you have to drain, but at the same time, if you pull the cap and you see that there's any type of residue or trash in there, go ahead and drain that out, maybe more than once if you have any type of trash in there. It should just be like a nice blue or nice green or red or whatever color coolant's in there, and it should be kind of topped off, and you'll see the fill level once you pull the radiator cap off. Other than that, before you go out and ride, you'll see these little bleeder screws on your forks. It's a good idea to go ahead and pop those out just to bleed the forks out. There's usually some air trapped behind here. If there's not, that's probably because the guy took care of his bike and he kept these bled after every ride. But go ahead and unscrew these until you hear the air release, and then dial those back in. And then from there, you'll be able to see how the suspension actually responds, and you'll be able to dial it in for your weight and your rider level. Other than that, guys, the air filter is always something that you want to inspect. So pop off the seat. Behind that, you'll see the air filter. If it's dirty, go ahead and clean that up or have it replaced. Make sure you oil it properly before you put it back in. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Other than that, you guys have a great night. Peace.